After the maid was let go, her young son made a single phone call. The billionaire dismissed everyone. Maria Delgado had only $40 in her purse and a 4-year-old boy sleeping in the backseat of a car that struggled to start in the chilly air. Just 3 hours earlier, she had been escorted from the grandest house in Greenwich, Connecticut, accused of theft in front of people she had served coffee to for 6 years. She didn't protest or shed tears. She simply picked up her son's stuffed rabbit from the mudroom floor and exited through the servants' entrance for the final time. Unbeknownst to Maria, her son had discreetly slipped a business card into his tiny jacket pocket that morning, one with a phone number no one outside the family was meant to use. In less than a day, that small piece of paper would unravel an entire household. Welcome back to the channel, friends. Before we get into the story, I want to express my gratitude to everyone who continues to return for these narratives. It truly means a lot. Quick question: what city or country are you tuning in from tonight? Drop it in the comments. I love seeing how far these tales reach. Now, settle in, because today's story is among the most emotional we've ever shared. It revolves around a mother who lost everything in a single afternoon, a little boy who didn't grasp what being fired meant, and one phone call that forever altered the lives of an entire family. Maria Delgado was a rule follower, so when she was accused of breaching the one rule she never would, nobody believed her, not even the man who once considered her family. Have you ever been punished for something you didn't do? The worst part isn't the punishment itself. It's that no one even bothered to ask your side of the story. Keep that feeling in mind as you witness what unfolds for Maria. The Whitfield estate sat at the end of a long gravel driveway in Greenwich, Connecticut, behind iron gates that opened only for cars worth more than most homes in the country. Richard Whitfield had built a financial technology empire from a garage in Austin, Texas, and by the age of 42, his name graced magazine covers alongside terms like visionary and self-made. Yet Richard was rarely at home. He was often in Singapore closing deals, in Zurich meeting investors, spending more time in airports than in his own kitchen. That's where Maria came into play. Maria Delgado had been employed by the Whitfield family for 6 years, arriving from Guatemala with just a suitcase and a determination that her son, Mateo, would have a safe childhood. She started as a part-time housekeeper and rose to head of daily operations, not through favoritism, but because she consistently arrived early, stayed late, and treated every room in that mansion as if it were her own. Mateo was now 4. A quiet, inquisitive boy with dark curls and large brown eyes who had nearly grown up in the estate's east wing, playing with wooden blocks on the marble floor while his mother dusted portraits of people he would never meet. "Mama, why does Mr. Whitfield have so many rooms he never sleeps in?" Mateo once asked, and Maria laughed, telling him that some people collected houses like others collect seashells, beautiful but mostly empty. Richard Whitfield barely knew his housekeeper's son by name, but there had been a few rare mornings when he was between flights and found Mateo sitting cross-legged on the kitchen floor, stacking cereal boxes. Once, just once, Richard knelt down, tousled the boy's hair and said, "Building something big there, buddy." He pulled a business card from his jacket pocket, jotted his direct cell number on the back, a number even his board members didn't have, and tucked it into Mateo's little jacket pocket as a joke. "For emergencies," Richard smiled, already checking his watch and preparing to leave. "If the tower ever falls down." Mateo, who couldn't read yet, kept that card in his jacket for 3 months, and Maria never knew it was there. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning in November. Diane Sinclair, the estate manager in charge of the household staff and who reported directly to Richard's chief of staff, called an emergency meeting in the servants' hallway at 7:15. Her tone was clipped and controlled, the way it always was before delivering bad news. "A diamond bracelet is missing from Mrs. Whitfield's master suite." She quickly corrected herself. There was no Mrs. Whitfield anymore, not since the divorce 2 years prior. It was in the safe in the dressing room. Security footage shows the safe was accessed at 9:40 p.m. last night. Only 3 people had the code that day, Maria, Thomas Reyes, and myself. Maria's stomach dropped before Diane even mentioned her name. Maria Delgado, Thomas Reyes, and myself. Diane continued, her eyes avoiding Maria's face. Thomas was off-site with his family in Boston, confirmed. That leaves 2 names on this list. The hallway fell silent. 6 other staff members stood frozen, their eyes darting to the ground, to the walls, anywhere but at Maria. "I didn't touch that safe," Maria stated, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "I was with my son at the doctor's office until 8 o'clock. Ask the pediatrician's office. Ask anyone. We'll be reviewing everything," Diane replied flatly, her tone revealing she had already made up her mind. "In the meantime, per company policy, you're suspended without pay, effective immediately, pending investigation." Suspended. The word hit Maria like a slap. "Diane, I've worked here for 6 years. I have never. This isn't personal, Maria." Diane finally met her gaze, and for a brief moment, something resembling guilt flickered in her eyes, vanishing just as quickly. "It's protocol." By 9 that morning, Maria stood in the mudroom with a cardboard box containing 6 years of her life. A spare cardigan, a photo of Mateo's first birthday taped inside her locker, a coffee mug with a chipped handle that nobody else wanted. Mateo stood beside her, confused, clutching his stuffed rabbit, dressed in the navy jacket he always wore on the days he accompanied her to work due to daycare closures. "Mama, are we going home early?" he asked. Maria knelt, forcing a smile onto a face that felt like it might shatter. "Yes, baby, we're going home early." She didn't explain that she had just lost her job, nor did she mention that the accusation of theft would haunt her during every future background check and interview. She didn't tell him that they had $1,100 in savings and rent was due in 9 days. Instead, she took his small hand in hers and walked out through the same door she had passed through every morning for 6 years, this time without anyone saying goodbye. That night, alone in a cramped apartment with a crying mother and a bewildered 4-year-old, something occurred that would put the entire Whitfield household on edge. What would you do at 4 years old when the only thing you understood was that your mother was upset and you desperately wanted to help? Mateo was about to make a decision no adult in that house would have dared to make. The apartment Maria and Mateo shared was a 1-bedroom on the 2nd floor of a converted duplex in Stamford, 15 minutes from the Whitfield estate, yet worlds apart in every other way. The radiator clanked, and the hallway smelled of someone else's dinner, but it was theirs, and until that morning it had sufficed. Maria sat at the small kitchen table long after Mateo had gone to bed, staring at a calculator on her phone, struggling with numbers that wouldn't add up no matter how often she tried. Rent, Mateo's daycare deposit for the next month, the car payment. 6 years of glowing references meant nothing if the last line on her employment history read, "Terminated." Theft investigation. She buried her face in her hands and for the first time since leaving that house, allowed herself to cry. Down the short hallway, Mateo wasn't asleep. He lay in his small bed, listening to his mother weep through the thin wall, and something in his 4-year-old mind decided this was a problem that needed fixing. He recalled the tower of cereal boxes that had once collapsed in the kitchen, and how the nice man with the shiny watch had given him a card and said, "If the tower ever falls down." Mateo didn't completely understand what had happened that day, but he sensed his mother was sad, and that felt like a tower tumbling down. He climbed out of bed, rummaged through a small pile of clothes on his chair until he found the navy jacket, and pulled out the slightly bent business card from the inside pocket, where it had remained forgotten for 3 months. He couldn't read the name on the front, but he recognized the numbers on the back, because his mother had spent the last year teaching him to count using the buttons on the microwave. He took the card and Maria's old cracked cell phone, which she kept in the kitchen drawer as a backup, into the hallway, and with the careful concentration of a child completing an important task, he entered the numbers one by one. It rang twice. "This is Richard." The voice on the other end was sharp and distracted, clearly expecting a business call at 9:40 at night. There was a pause, then a small voice. "Hi, it's Mateo." Richard Whitfield standing in a hotel suite in Chicago with a glass of scotch he hadn't touched and 3 unread emails from his lawyer glowing on his laptop screen froze. "Matteo," he said slowly, "the little guy who builds towers." "Yeah." A pause, the shuffling of small feet on a cold floor. "My mama's crying. She got fired today. Diane said she stole something, but Mama didn't steal anything. I know because I was with her at the doctor's office, and then we got ice cream, and then we went home, and she never even went in Mrs. Whitfield's room. She doesn't even like going in there because it's spooky." Richard sat down slowly on the edge of the hotel bed. "Your mama is Maria who worked at my house." "Yeah, she's really sad, mister. Can you tell Diane she's wrong? You said if the tower falls down, I could call. My mama's tower fell down." For a long moment, Richard Whitfield, a man who had negotiated 8-figure deals without flinching, found himself speechless before a 4-year-old on the other end of a cracked phone. "Matteo," he finally said, his voice softer than it had been in years. "Can you put your mama on the phone for me?" Richard Whitfield had built an empire on due diligence, checking every fact before making a decision. He was about to learn that he had never applied the same standard to his own household. Have you ever trusted the wrong person simply because they were the closest? That mistake was about to cost Richard Whitfield far more than a diamond bracelet. Maria nearly dropped the phone when Matteo appeared in the kitchen doorway, holding it out to her, his small face serious in a way only a child trying to fix something can be. "Mama, it's the tower man." "The what?" "The man from the towers. He wants to talk to you." Confused and exhausted, Maria took the phone, expecting a wrong number, a scam call, anything but what she actually heard. "Maria, this is Richard Whitfield." The room felt as though it tilted. "Mr. Whitfield, I'm so sorry. I don't know how my son got this number. Maria, stop. I need you to tell me exactly what happened today from the beginning, and I need the truth, not what you think I want to hear." She recounted everything. The meeting in the hallway at 7:15. The accusation, the box containing 6 years of her life packed within 11 minutes, the exit through the servant's door. She explained about the pediatrician's appointment, the receipt still in her purse with a time stamp of 6:52 p.m., an hour before the safe had allegedly been accessed. Her voice trembled as she insisted that she had never taken so much as a spare pen from that house. Richard listened without interruption, and something cold settled in his chest. Not at Maria, but at himself. He had allowed Diane Sinclair to manage his household for 4 years with little oversight because she was efficient, because she spared him the details, while he was always somewhere else, chasing the next deal. "Maria, I want you to keep that receipt safe. Don't say anything to anyone else about this. Can you be in my office downtown tomorrow at 9 a.m.? I'll send a car." "Mr. Whitfield, I don't want trouble, I just want to understand what happened." "So do I," Richard replied, "and I intend to find out." He hung up and immediately called his head of security, Gary Asse, a former federal investigator who had handled sensitive matters for the Whitfield family for a decade. "I need full security footage from my Grenache residence. Every camera going back 72 hours, Richard instructed. "And I need the safe access logs pulled independently, not through the household system but directly from the manufacturer." "That'll take some digging, but I can have preliminary footage by morning," Gary replied. "Can I ask what this is about?" "A woman who worked in my house for 6 years just got fired in 11 minutes based on an accusation nobody bothered to verify," Richard explained. "I want to know who actually opened that safe." By 2 a.m., Gary called back. His voice was careful, as though he knew the news wouldn't be welcome. "Richard, the safe access logs from the manufacturer don't match the household records Diane submitted to your chief of staff. The safe was accessed at 9:40 p.m. That part's accurate, but the household system logged it under a generic staff code that was reset that same week. The manufacturer's independent log shows the access came from a fingerprint scan." "Whose fingerprint?" Richard asked. A pause followed. "Diane Sinclair." Richard closed his eyes. "There's more," Gary continued. "I pulled financial records on staff members with safe access, standard procedure when something like this comes up. Diane has been making minimum payments on nearly $90,000 in credit card debt for the last 8 months. Payments began slipping right around the time her ex-husband stopped sending support checks for their 2 children. The picture formed in Richard's mind with a sickening clarity. Diane hadn't investigated a theft. She had committed one and constructed the fastest, most convenient narrative to cover herself, pointing at the 2 people who had access to the safe that week, knowing full well that one of them, Thomas, had an airtight alibi in Boston, leaving Maria as the sole target. "She didn't just steal from me," Richard said quietly. "She ruined an innocent woman's life to protect herself, and I allowed it because I was too busy to check." The next morning, Richard Whitfield walked into his estate for the first time in 6 weeks, not for a meeting, not for a deal, but to confront the people who had allowed a mother and her son to be thrown out over a lie. What do you do when you realize that those you trusted most weren't safeguarding your home? They were protecting themselves at the expense of others. Richard was about to discover just how deep that betrayal ran. Maria arrived at Richard's downtown office right at 9, Mateo's hand in hers because there was nowhere else for him to go. She half expected security to turn her away. Instead, an assistant led her straight into a glass-walled conference room where Richard stood waiting, still in the rumpled shirt from his overnight flight back from Chicago. "Mrs. Delgado, thank you for coming." He knelt slightly to Mateo's level. "And thank you, Mateo. Your tower call might be the most important phone call anyone has made in my company this year." Mateo stared at him solemnly and asked, "Did you fix Mama's tower?" "I'm working on it, buddy, I promise." Richard laid out everything he had learned overnight, the fingerprint logs, the falsified household report, Diane's financial troubles. Maria sat frozen, her hand pressed to her mouth as disbelief overtook her. "She looked me in the eye," Maria whispered. "She made everyone in that hallway think I was a thief." "I know," Richard said, "and I won't pretend an apology fixes that, but I will rectify what I can." At 11 that morning, Richard walked through the front doors of his Greenwich estate for the first time in 6 weeks, with Gary O'Shea beside him carrying a folder of evidence. He called for an all-staff meeting in the same hallway where Maria had been dismissed the day before. Diane Sinclair arrived expecting to brief him on quarterly household budgets, but instead found her employer standing with his arms crossed, a look on his face she had never seen before. "Diane, walk me through what happened with the bracelet yesterday." She recited the same flip story she had told the staff, the safe, the 3 access codes, the process of elimination. "That's interesting," Richard said, "because the safe manufacturer's independent log, the one that can't be edited by anyone inside this house, shows a fingerprint access at 9:40 p.m., not a code, a fingerprint. Care to guess whose fingerprint it was?" The color drained from Diane's face. "I can explain. You accused an innocent woman of theft to protect yourself," Richard said, his voice low and controlled in a way that was somehow more terrifying than shouting. "You allowed her to leave this house in front of her son with a box and a reputation you knew was a lie. Do you realize what you did to her?" Diane's composure broke. "Richard, I have 2 kids. I was drowning. I made a mistake, one mistake, and I panicked. Maria worked for this family for 6 years without complaint, and the moment something went wrong, you sacrificed her in 11 minutes without a second thought. That's not panic, that's calculation." He turned to the other staff members gathered in the hallway, the same faces that had stood silently the day before while Maria was dismissed. "I also want to know why 6 people stood here yesterday and watched an innocent woman get fired without anyone speaking up for her, without anyone calling me." No one responded. A young staff member named Priya finally broke the silence, her voice trembling. "Diane told us that if anyone questioned the investigation, we'd be seen as obstructing it. We were scared for our own jobs, Mr. Whitfield. I'm sorry. We should have said something." Richard surveyed the hallway slowly, taking in the fear that had apparently governed his home for years while he was elsewhere, closing deals, building an empire, trusting a system he never bothered to verify. "Diane, you're terminated effective immediately, and I'll discuss with legal what else this involves. Anyone who actively helped falsify records will also be terminated. Anyone who stayed silent out of fear. I understand, but this house will operate differently from this day forward." By that afternoon, 3 more names were added to the list. a household accountant who had assisted Diane in quietly rerouting expense reports to cover her spending gaps, and 2 staff members who had known about the fingerprint scan and remained silent when questioned. In total, Richard dismissed 5 people that day, disrupting a household structure that,